the fundamentals, I was like, I have to be 100% ready to to your point,
Gotta
to
be
the best of my
prepared.
ability, bro. Right? Because failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Right? So I was like, not knowing something doesn't make me scared, right? It's okay to
Right.
not know something. Like I tell my kids all the
You don't
time,
know
like
what you don't know.
you don't know what you don't know. It's okay. And if someone says like, "Hey, it's supposed to be this way," you have to be humble enough to accept that and be like, "Okay, that thank you for that," you
Sure.
know. But not being prepared scares me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like stepping on the mat and be like, "What the hell am I supposed to teach
You know what
today?"
I think is like really set up a lot of like, and I can only, guys, I can only speak from what I've experienced in like the arena of jujitsu is like, I think there's always kind of been this thing to where like jujitsu instructors act as if like there is a singular way of doing something,
Yeah, agreed.
or like, you know, that's wrong. And I'm like, well, I've done it this way hundreds of times to people. So is it wrong or is it just different? You know, so like I've always, and now like even when I'm explaining stuff to people, I say, guys, I really struggle with saying like, this is the way to do something. It kind of goes back to like when you're doing content, like you never want to tell people what they should do. You want to tell people what you've done. Right. So I really go through the lens of, now I say things like, this is how I would typically approach XYZ situation. But, you know, with you being shorter, with you being taller, like these sort
Yep.
of things can be, which is like why ecological dynamic stuff was like, or the ecological approach or the restrained sled approach, like that was so like attractive to me. It was just because like, man, like they're speaking to my mind that I've always, because even sometimes if I've seen techniques, I've gone to seminars. I went to a Ribeiro Brothers seminar one time and like they showed some stuff and like everybody's soaking it up and like none of it worked for me. And like somebody listening to this, well, you probably weren't doing something wrong. And I'll tell you what, like I've always been pretty detail oriented down to as much as I can possibly
Yeah.
like absorb. And you know, maybe I'm 6'5", and the way that they place their hips and their feet just ain't going to work for me. So,
Yeah.
so now when I really explain that is like the struggle of for years and years black belts, you know, all the way from like Brazilian black belts, even some now, maybe some you've interviewed who think that like there's a certain way to do things. I know in fitness, which I've coached in for 10 years, and now I've coached jujitsu consistently for about 6 years. Like there tends to never be a singular, there is a more right than wrong way, which in my coaching, my instructing, I try to be more right than wrong. But like there's never just a single way though.
Yeah.
And I think like we were maybe initially for me is like when Sean came, he was so good. He was better than any instructor I'd ever seen, any instructor I'd ever spoken with or like interacted with. And like, I felt so fortunate to be able to learn from him and to be able to absorb things from him. And it identified this large gap in my instructing, in the way that I would deliver a session. And at that time, initially, like I was like, dude, I got to level up or I'm gonna lose my people
Yeah.
because he cast this shadow that was so wide and so broad that it was like if I don't level up, because truly in the past, like I would just kind of go off of things that I would see or things that I would remember, and like I would basically do technique of the day in class and didn't really think too much about like, well, so now like when I view growth in jujitsu, I think there's self study, there's exploration, and then there's technique of the day from the gym, right? I think there's like this triad of how you grow. Well, like I was only doing technique of the day, so when I came in, I needed to start coaching. I was like, oh my gosh, like I gotta like know a lot of stuff. So I
Yeah.
kind of went back to like, well, I just need to be a chapter ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
All right. And then a lot of instructors will poo poo on instructionals and, you know, things that like BJJ Fanatics has, some of your guys like, you know, Pressinger and some of his like membership stuff. And I'm like, man, like that's like sitting in at a seminar anytime you want to.
Yeah.
So I'm going to really dive into literally content. Like you know, we're going through arm bars right now. Like was studying that for like the last 6 weeks. And like, then I'm going to be going in X guard. Like I'm already starting to study that, even though I'm showing. So it's like, I'm already making sure that I am prepared and I've got as much of the variances of these things understood so that I can field a question, or maybe I need to feel out and just see what happens. But it's always going to revert back to like, there's not one way to do anything. There's multiple ways to do anything. Here's how I believe is an effective way of doing XYZ technique, move, whatever.